Back in the summer of 1995, the UK wasn't just talking about music. It was picking a side in an all-out cultural war. And this was way more than just two bands fighting for a #1 single. It was about class, it was about where you came from, and it was about what it even meant to be British. This is the story of Blur versus Oasis.
And I'm not kidding about how big this got. This wasn't some little story tucked away in the music papers. No way. The battle for the #1 spot was so huge, it actually led the national evening news on the BBC. Can you even imagine that happening today? A pop chart race getting the same airtime as major world events? The whole country was absolutely captivated.
So the big question is, how did we even get here? How on earth did two pop songs, Blur's Country House and Oasis's Roll With It, become the one thing the entire country was focused on? Let's dig in and figure out how a simple chart battle blew up into a genuine cultural phenomenon.
Okay, so to really get the fight, you have to understand the fighters. And this whole thing was framed perfectly as this classic British conflict tapping right into a very raw nerve. North versus South. You had two bands that, honestly, couldn't have been more different. And they came to represent two totally different ideas of what England was.
I mean, look at this. The battle lines were just drawn so neatly. In one corner, you had Blur, southern, middle-class, clever art school kids. Their music was witty, sarcastic, a smart commentary on British life. And in the other corner, Oasis, northern, working-class lads from Manchester. Their sound wasn't about clever observation. It was just raw, direct, massive anthems. It was pure escapism. The media and the public ate it up.
Now, it's worth remembering they weren't the only bands around. You had the big four of Britpop. Suede was a bit more glam rock, and Pulp was brilliantly eccentric. But Blur and Oasis, they just became these two giant opposing forces at the very center of the whole movement. They were the main event. But here's the thing. It wasn't always this bitter rivalry. Early on, they were actually pretty friendly, part of the same music scene. So what happened? How did a bit of professional competition spiral into this genuine, personal hatred? Well, the tension was about to boil over. You can actually watch the tension build, step by step. It really kicked off in February at the Brit Awards. Blur just cleaned up, winning everything. Then, just a couple months later, Oasis gets their first #1, and their confidence just goes through the roof. That's when the taunts started, and that was the spark. The final move, though, was pure business. Blur's record label deliberately moved their release date to go head-to-head. That was it. War was on.
And apparently this was the moment. This was the direct provocation. According to Damon Albarn, Liam Gallagher, just full of swagger after hitting the top spot, gets right in his face at a party and shouts this. It was raw, it was arrogant, and it was the moment that lit the fuse on the whole thing.
So, the stage is set, the date is locked in, August 14th, 1995. And this was way more than just a release date, it was a battleground. The media went into a total frenzy, fans were mobilized, and behind the scenes, some very clever strategies were unfolding. You absolutely cannot overstate the role of the music press here, especially the NME. They didn't just report on this rivalry, you could say they actively built it. This cover, framing it as a boxing match, the British Heavyweight Championship, was just genius. It turned a chart race into a national sporting event. It was impossible to look away. And this wasn't just a battle of songs, it was a battle of strategy. Check out that release formats row. Oasis put out one standard CD single, pretty normal. But Blur's label, they did something incredibly smart. They released two different versions of the Country House CD, each with different bonus tracks. And what did that do? It encouraged all the diehard Blur fans to buy the single twice, an absolute masterstroke of chart tactics. The results finally came in on Sunday, August 20th. Broadcast live on the radio, the whole nation was waiting. And yes, there was a clear winner in the battle of the singles. But as we're about to find out, winning that battle was a very different thing from winning the war. And there you have it. Blur's Country House sold 274,000 copies, beating Oasis by about 58,000. That two-CD strategy totally paid off. The art school kids from the South had officially beaten the working-class lads from the North. On paper, at least, Blur were the champions. To celebrate their victory, Blur went on the legendary TV show Top of the Pops. And in just a moment of pure, cheeky triumph, their bassist, Alex James, performed while wearing an Oasis t-shirt.
It was just this final, brilliant little jab that perfectly summed up the gloating mood of the winners.
But then the albums came out, and this is where the entire story just flips completely on its head. Blur's album, The Great Escape, it did really well in the UK, but just look at those Oasis numbers. What's the Story Morning Glory sold over 20 million copies around the world. It wasn't just a hit, it was a global juggernaut that completely, totally overshadowed Blur's success. Oasis didn't just win the war, they achieved total world domination.
And if you need one single number to really understand that level of domination, it's this one. The next summer, Oasis announced 2 huge concerts at Knebworth. 2.5 million people applied for tickets. Let that sink in. That's about 4% of the entire UK population at the time. We hadn't seen anything on that scale since the Beatles.
Now, losing that single battle clearly hit Oasis, and especially Noel Gallagher, really hard. And his reaction was famously awful. He made this absolutely horrific comment to a journalist, which, to be fair, he did retract and apologize for almost immediately. It's a shocking thing to read, but it just goes to show you how deeply personal and nasty this rivalry had become. This wasn't marketing anymore. This was real.
Okay, so decades have passed since that crazy summer. The anger has cooled down, the insults have faded into memory, and the story actually has a pretty surprising third act. Let's take a look at how this legendary feud finally came to an end and what its legacy is today.
The healing process took a while, but it really happened. It started with a joint charity performance in 2013, and then, get this, Noel actually collaborated on a song for Damon's project, Gorillaz. Today, there's this sense of a shared history, a real mutual respect between them. As Damon Albarn later said, at the end of the day, they were the only 2 people who truly knew what it was like to go through that insane media storm.
So why does all this still matter? Well, because the incredible energy from this battle helped fuel this wider cultural movement that got known as Cool Britannia. The new government, led by Tony Blair, saw the power of Britpop's optimism and basically used it to rebrand the entire nation as cool, modern, and creative. That image of Noel Gallagher at 10 Downing Street, it became the photo that defined a whole era where pop culture and politics were completely tied together.
Which kind of brings us to a final thought. This whole battle was defined by a shared national moment, right? Everyone rushing out to buy a physical CD in the same week, everyone tuning into the same TV show to see the results. In today's world of streaming algorithms and social media bubbles, could you ever have a single cultural showdown that grabs everyone's attention in the same way? I'm not so sure. It's definitely something to think about.